Hello everyone. Today we're going to get down to the basics about shelter. Let's get down to basics. Hello everyone, it's Darby, RiverBendSurvival again. Today we're going to get started on the Bare Bones Basic Bushcrafting series. I have finally decided on the format that I'm going to use for putting these videos out. I will do them by section, and it'll be a large number of sections. We'll have a shelter section, we'll have knives and cutting tools section, we'll have fire starting. It'll be a lot of different sections. But what I want to do is I want to keep them all short. So there may be 15 of them in the shelter building, different types of shelters, how to build them, how to set them up, when, where, how. There may be 10 in the fire making section, whatever that number may come out to be. But what I want to do is keep them short. So what I'll do is I'll do them as the Bare Bones Basic Bushcrafting. So it'll be BBBB dash shelter dash the number. I may put the title of that video on there. The reason I decided to do it that way is so that when you go to watch a video, because remember, this is for basics. This is for people who are just getting into it or thinking about getting into it. I want people to be able to go back and when they go, what did Darby do for that plow point shelter? I don't want them to have to watch an hour-long video of me setting up 10 different shelters to get to the one little part they want. What I want you to be able to do is go, this weekend I want to try this, or I saw Darby do this, and be able to pull up that little short 10-minute or less video and get to it. Today's video is going to be on selection and care of your shelter system. Rule number 1, storage. I never store my tarps when they're wet. I never store them when they're dirty. If I have to pack it up and it's wet when I leave, which happens to everybody, when I get home, I hang it out to dry. Whether it be in my garage or whether it be in the backyard on a clothesline, I hang it out and let it dry. If I store it and it's dirty, when I get home, I hang it over the clothesline out back, I hose it down, get it clean, and then let it dry completely before I roll it up. Now, part of rule number 1 on storage is I have no evidence or scientific proof to back up what I'm about to tell you. This is 100% my opinion. I never ever store my tarps folded. I don't know that it makes any difference. All I can tell you is my tarps last 5 years or more storing them the way I do. I always roll them. I always roll them up tight, and I always secure them with these bungee cords that I've shown you before. These are just and these are extremely important for another part coming up here real quick. These are just the little elastic bungee cords that have the plastic ball on it. Another thing that I do is when I fold my tarp up, well, let me back up. When I get to a campsite, I told you my tarp is odd size. It's longer one way than it is the other. When I get to the campsite, I make a mental note of which way it was folded and rolled. If I lay it out and it was lengthwise, it was longer as it went out, when I go to put it back up, I make my folds widthwise this time and then roll it up. So every other time it gets folded and rolled the opposite direction. One time it's lengthwise, one time it's widthwise. Does it make any difference? I have no idea. What I'm trying to do is keep the creases and folds from hitting at the same spot every time, because I have seen where tarps get worn when they're in storage and the points are always at the same spot. Like I said, I don't know if it's scientific. I don't know anything like that. All I'm doing here is telling you what works for me. Rule number 2. I use bungees not only to secure my tarp and keep it together, but I use bungees 100% of the time when I put my tarp up. No matter which way you put a tarp up for shelter, there's going to be a stress point to it. It doesn't matter if it's snow weight, it doesn't matter if it's the weight of rain hitting it and bellowing it out, it doesn't matter if it's wind, it doesn't matter if it's you bumping into it or somebody else bumping into it. The number one way to protect the eyelets, and you see after 5 years of use, if the camera picks this up, there is not a thing wrong with any of the eyelets on my tarp. That is the fail point. The reason being is because I use bungees 100% of the time. If I'm going to stretch this tarp out, and I'll show this when I start doing the tarp setups on the next videos for this series right here, I stick this bungee through the hole, and this is what I tie on to. And I do it just to the point where it's just snug, just so the tarp's pulled tight. Not stretched, not pulled so you can play dueling banjos on it, just to take the slack out. That way, when I bump into it, somebody else bumps into it, snow gets on it, which I don't have that problem, the wind blows, which I do have a problem with, instead of this eyelet or the tarp itself taking the stress, this flexes. So the tarp gets pulled away a little bit, it flexes and retightens. By doing this one simple trick, you will make your tarps last years longer. Rule number 3, use it for what it's there for. I don't care, and I'm going to get some people that are not going to like what I'm about to say. I don't care what you've seen on other web or other channels. I don't care what you've read in books. I don't care about any of that. There are people that will tell you to use your tarp, lay it out, put debris on it, drag it back to the shelter to make your debris shelter. The reason you do that is because you can bring more back at one time, obviously, and it makes building your debris shelter faster. The answer to that is, it's also the way you damage your tarp. When you have sticks and leaves in it and you're dragging it across the ground or even putting it up over your shoulder, you are taking monumental risk in popping holes in your tarp. Once you've started getting holes in it, yeah, you can duct tape it, you can do different things, but now you're patching and it's never going to get any better. I promise you. The first time you have to tape a hole, you're going to continue to have problems. You can get it to work for a while, I'm not denying that, but you might as well go ahead and plan on getting another tarp when you get back. Use it for what it's made for. It is made to be a shelter. Treat it as a shelter. Rule number 4, protect it. It does you no good if it has holes in it, and it does you no good if you've torn it up while getting to or from your location. When I do mine, this is my Bare Bones Basic Bushcrafting kit that I've shown y'all. This is it. If you notice, when I roll my tarp up, I roll it to the same width as whatever bag I'm putting it in, under, whatever. I always roll it to the exact same width. It doesn't take rocket science to figure out what the width of your bag is. You can just sit there and keep folding until you figure out which pattern works best for whatever bag you're using. The reason I always do it to the same width is because if it's sticking out, like say a sleeping pad. If you have a sleeping pad on there that sticks out this far, that means this much of it's going to get hit by stuff you're walking by, and this much of it can get hit by stuff you're walking by. So, I always make mine the exact same size as the bag I'm using. The next tip I'm going to give you, which stays in the same category of protecting it, is going to sound backwards to a lot of people. Unless I'm going out and it's just a torrential downpour non-stop, if I'm taking a wool blanket, I roll the wool blanket around the outside of my tarp. If it's a torrential downpour and I have to teach a class, it can't be postponed or whatever, I will then put the tarp around the outside of it, depending on where I'm at in the environment. If I'm in South Texas brush country, it's still going inside the wool blanket. Now here's the reason for it. Yes, my wool blanket's going to get wet. It's still going to retain 80% of its functionality. However, if I get a thorn that pops into my wool blanket still works. If I get a thorn that pops into my tarp no longer works. It'll keep me drier than no tarp, but now I have holes I'm having to deal with issues. The blanket's going to work if it gets a thorn stuck in it. The tarp is not. So I will always wrap my tarp inside the blanket to protect the tarp. If I can stay dry, say I'm worried about cold. If I'm carrying a wool blanket, I'm obviously worried about cold. If I can stay dry and hopefully get a fire built, that will more than make up for having a damp blanket or a wet blanket. The blanket will still keep 80% of it, retain 80% of its heat retention, but I even have the opportunity then to dry the blanket out of the rain using the fire. It gives me so many more options than having a tarp which has holes in it. Keep in mind, if a thorn from a mesquite tree goes into this, it's not just getting one hole. The odds are, because this thing is folded up so tight and so small, it's going to make 4 or 5 holes. Now, it's folded 5, 6, 8 different times, and then it's rolled. So now I don't have a hole that's at this corner over here. I have a hole that's at that corner, in the middle, across the top, back down here zigzagging. I now have a sieve. So, yes, it sounds backwards, but the way I protect mine is I roll it inside the wool blanket if I'm taking a wool blanket. The last thing on this section of protecting it, if you attach it to your bag like I do, like on this particular bag it's attached to the bottom, that's fine. I think it's perfectly safe to have it back down here. What you have to remember though is, when you take off your pack for a break or you're going to set up camp or whatever, don't just sling your bag and let it drop. I have seen, folks, I can't tell you how many people I've seen that have dropped their bag down, set it down, they're tired, whatever the case may be, and there's a sharp rock, there's a stick sticking out of the ground, whatever the case may be, and it goes right in to their tarp. So if you're going to put it on the bottom like I do, and there's nothing wrong with it, just remember when you take it off, don't just sling your bag. Rule number 5, fire. Remember, if you're going to use this kind of tarp, it is not fire friendly. When I start doing the shelter setups, I will show you how I do use a fire near or almost under these. You have to be so careful, and it's such a specific skill set that you will need to work on it. You will need to practice it. You will need to experiment with it. You need to be so safe when using these around a fire. They are plastic. You don't even have to have it close to the fire for it to melt. Always keep in mind the heat and the flames from the fire. The heat will actually get it long before the flames will in 99% of the cases, and you have to be careful and conscious of sparks jumping out onto this. Just as a general rule, fire and these don't go well together. That is one of the places where like a canvas tarp excels over this. Rule number 6, prepare to fail. These are not bulletproof. I have not had, this one obviously has not failed in any way, shape, or form in the last 5 years, but I'm always prepared for it to. Nothing will ruin a trip quicker than being wet all the time. So the easiest way to prepare if you're using one of these, and this is where these excel, is a subject we talked about or touched on just a few minutes ago. Carry a tape roll. I use Gorilla brand duct tape. I think it's the best out there. There's plenty of great duct tapes out there. I just like theirs. I don't endorse it. I'm just telling you what I use. Make a tape roll. It takes 20 seconds to cut a piece of cardboard and wrap it with duct tape. If I do get a hole in it, and I've gotten holes in them over the years, the last 20 years or whatever, I've damaged plenty of these. 20-30 seconds worth of time, no weight, no size, a drop down in your pack is well worth the effort if you do get a hole, to be able to rip off 2 little pieces of tape, stick one on the outside, one on the inside, and make your tarp usable till you get home and can replace it. Rule number 7, the last of my rules. Practice. Unlike, I don't know, sword swallowing or flame throwing or anything like that, this is an inexpensive item to practice with. You're not going to get injured doing this. This costs you nothing to practice with. The more time you spend practicing, setting the shelter up, take it down, set it back up, take it down, will give you more experience. Now, what that experience is going to lead you to do is to experiment. The more you experiment with things, the better off it's going to be for you, and the better it's going to work for you. And that's the key to this. This shelter is for you to sleep in. When I start making these videos this week, hopefully this week, when I start making these videos showing different setups that I use or some that I don't use, but they're fine shelters, when I start showing you how I do it, that is a basic spot to start with. Try it my way. If you like my way, continue to do it the way that I do it. If you change it and alter it for what you like, for your environment, for what makes you comfortable, for your skill set, whatever the case may be, it then becomes yours. That's when it becomes fun. Setting up shelters, I enjoy it okay, especially with a tarp. I mean, it takes just minutes for me to set up a shelter on most of the shelter systems that I use. I only really use 4 different types of shelters doing this, and those will be the first 4 I cover, of course. But practice with it, get experience with it, experiment with it, and make it yours. Until next time, this is Darby telling you, get out in the dirt and have some fun. Thanks.